From the nation's capital, the McLaughlin Group, an unrehearsed program presenting inside opinions and forecasts on major issues of the day.
GE is proud to support the McLaughlin Group. GE, from aircraft engines to appliances, we bring good things to life.
Here's the moderator, John McLaughlin.
Issue 1, the waiting game. A quiet phase. That's where the Western hostages negotiations are this week.
The work will continue, the contracts will continue, and we'll do it on a lower profile. This can't be solved. This problem, this very painful and intricate problem, cannot be solved through media.
The Shiite Muslims who are holding the Western hostages captive are demanding chiefly this: the release of some 400 Arab prisoners held in Israel. In exchange, the Muslim kidnappers will free all 11 Western hostages, 5 Americans, 2 Germans, 3 Brits, 1 Italian, plus 7 missing Israeli soldiers. One stumbling block: the Muslim captors also want the release of Arab prisoners held in Europe for acts of terrorism, notably the notorious Hamedi brothers, who are tied to the 1985 TWA hijacking. UN Secretary General says no.
I think we should not mix up the hostages and the detainees and the prisoners with those who are in other European countries, for instance, Germany, England, Spain, and so on, because that is a legal problem.
President Bush takes the position that he will not be satisfied until all the hostages are home, but he lets the others do the deal cutting and sticking to the U.S. no negotiations with terrorist policies.
I don't see that there's anything that would diminish our policy at all in all of this. In fact, I'm just hopeful that it will result in the release of our people.
Question: can Yitzhak Shamir release the 400 Shiite prisoners in Israel and at the same time, Pat Buchanan, keep his government together?
I think the Israelis are right in their position, John. What they've got is 7 people in Lebanon. Some of them, they got to get an accounting for their dead and their missing, and they ought to get their live POWs back. I think the pressure is on Syria and Iran. The Israelis ought to demand to get all of them back. I do think if this thing runs into a gridlock, the Israelis might do well to give a passel of these Shiites back. But as for giving back those guys in Germany who are guilty of an act of murder against an American citizen, I would say no under any condition.
Fred.
Boy, there's a phrase you don't hear very often. Pat Buchanan. The Israelis are right. Boy, you don't hear that very much. But the fact is they are right. If the Israelis gave back the 375 Shiites plus Sheikh Obeid and didn't get at least an accounting and the return of the live prisoners of those 7 Israelis who were lost in the war and didn't get them back, it would only do one thing. In other words, if they exchanged all these prisoners for the release of the American hostages, it would encourage more hostage-taking of Americans to affect Israeli policy. You don't want that. So the Israelis are perfectly right, and it looks like there's a good chance it'll work. They'll release those people, Sheikh Obeid. The Israelis will get an accounting and get their prisoners back. The Americans will get out, and that's what we want.
Do you think they're hitting the big point here, Jack? Well, this hostage gambit is a brilliant setup strategy. Can you tell me why?
Let me be.
Is that too cryptic?
I'm in the unaccustomed position of agreeing with the 2 full mooners on this one. Totally. And let me make one other point. The Israelis look at this thing and they say, if we don't do this now, vis-a-vis the 7 missing servicemen, if we don't get this settled while this big deal is being made, we're never going to get it done. There is room for some bargaining. There is room, as people suggested, if there is evidence presented from the Arab side, the Israelis have let some of the Shiites go as a gesture. And I agree with Pat totally. They've got to be hanged tough on this business of those who committed crimes. Those are not hostages, those are criminals.
Welcome back, Mort. What is that, your court suit you're wearing? You look like a mortician.
No, John.
And who does your hair? Who's doing your hair? Mattel?
Did Mort Zuckerman leave me some money? That's the question.
Why is this a brilliant setup strategy? Do I have to tell you?
No. You don't have to tell me.
You tell me why it is.
I think, knowing how your mind works, I think I know what you're up to.
Tell me what I'm thinking. I'm thinking of 3 things.
That there's a secret plot here on the part of the United States to cozy back up to Iran and to cozy up to Syria and have them emerge as countries with whom we can do business as part of a grand new strategy in the Middle East.
I will concede, number one, although I was seeing it the other way, that Iran and Syria see their opportunity to become legitimized. That's number one. Give me the second point of the brilliant setup strategy.
Well,
as far as
also, if the Israelis get release the prisoners and the and Sheikh Obeid and stuff like that, there can be a deal. It will help.
Well, you're partially right, but where is the onus now? The onus is on the Israelis.
Oh, the onus is not on the Israelis.
It is on the Israelis. It's on the Israelis. Yes, it is. All right, let's finish the third point, and then I'm going to go to Pat. What's the third element of this brilliant setup strategy?
John, it must have something to do with the octopus theory.
The media focus of the world is on the Palestinian and the Shiite detainees. So that's the third element of the strategy.
Don,
Well, am I right or wrong?
Here's what's happening. The Syrians are and the Iranians are trying to drive a wedge right between the United States and Israel. We want our people back, so they're putting pressure on the Israelis. That's why I think the Israelis ought to really hold tough for their people. But when it gets to dead gridlock and the pressure's on the Israelis, and they ought to let a small passel go and put the ball right back in the court of the Syrians.
Are you saying Passel, P-A-R-C-E-L? Is that what
P-A-S-S-E-L.
Oh, a Passel.
Look, the Israelis have every right to get an accounting of their prisoners, and if they're shown evidence that they're as to the whereabouts of them, then they can release a few of them, and if they get the people back and the bodies back, then they can release the rest of the kids. But the Palestinians have nothing to do with it.
I want to get a Passel.
The one thing we shouldn't do is to follow part 17 of McLaughlin's cynical strategy here. One thing we shouldn't do is give Iran and Syria any credit at all. They don't deserve it at all. This could have been done a long time ago. We have to play along, but that's it.
And there is another thing we shouldn't do, and that is, and I hope Pat wasn't suggesting it, but that is lean on the Israelis to get them to release some prisoners now, or to release the prisoners without getting a full accounting of their own 7 servicemen in return of those that are alive.
I guess I'm going to have to tell you what's going on. This is not a hostage release. It is a pre-Middle East jockeying for public opinion. That's what it is.
Well, I'll tell you, there's got to be a lot of jockeying before the Iranians and the Syrians come out smelling like roses.
I think the Israelis are in a pretty good position in terms of world opinion, public opinion. Everybody agrees they ought to have their guys accounted for and their live guys released in this whole deal.
If Syria and Iran get away with what they want to get away with, will this mean more or less terrorism in the world?
I mean, in terms of hostage taking?
Yes.
Hostage taking, I think, less, because I think the Lebanese government is going to get basically control of Lebanon, and then there will be no excuse for having people taken hostages and hiding inside Lebanon.
If the U.S. and the Germans and others get their hostages back without negotiating, without giving anything, with merely Israel making a POW exchange, then it will severely put a crimp in hostage taking.
Jack, come on.
I think hostage taking is a declining stock. But terrorism is not going to end terrorism.
What are you saying?
I agree with Jack.
All 4 are correct. A unique phenomenon. Issue 2. The first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. Shakespeare, Henry VI.
Does America really need 70% of the world's lawyers? I think the answer is no.
Vice President Dan Quayle lambasted the U.S. legal system this week in front of, get this, 10,000 lawyers. To relieve the gridlock of litigiousness now paralyzing America and its ability to compete, Mr. Quayle proposed a 50-point reform of the U.S. civil justice system, which in its present sick and bloated state costs the American taxpayer $300 billion annually, more than we spend on national defense and about as much as we spend on education at all levels, federal, state, and local. He called for, 1, ceilings on punitive damages, those awards to plaintiffs designed to punish defendants rather than compensate plaintiffs for losses. 2, a loser pays rule to discourage frivolous litigation, meaning the loser pays for legal fees for both sides. 3, streamlining pretrial procedures which can drag on and on. 4, limiting expert testimony which can also drag on and on. As soon as the Vice President concluded his blistering attack before the American Bar Association, ABA President John Curtin rose in defense of his profession.
Anyone who believes a better day dawns when lawyers are eliminated bears the burden of explaining who will take their place, who will protect the poor, the injured, the victims of negligence, the victims of racial discrimination, and the victims of racial violence.
Who's right, Quayle or Curtin? I ask you, Fred Barnes.
All I can say is was so blessed with having that pompous ABA guy there, and he slam dunked him. I mean, it wouldn't have been half the story if that guy hadn't jumped in. This pompous lawyer saying that we're going to, you need us, all these lawyers, 200 times the lawyers there are in Japan, so we can defend the poor. The last time that guy saw a poor person was when somebody came to clean out his wastebasket in his office.
Now, what about the merits of Quayle's attack? The merits.
The merits are tremendous. He's right. The litigiousness of American society, spurred mainly by all these lawyers, is a tremendous drag on the economy. No question about that.
I think Quayle. I think Quayle had a great political moment. I mean, he handled it very well. I mean, you can't go wrong beating up lawyers. I mean, I can't let this go by without telling the great lawyer joke about how the laboratory scientists are using lawyers rather than rats in their experiments because there are more of them. They're cheaper to train. The laboratory attendants don't get fond of them. And there are some things rats won't do.
I want to ask Jack a question. This is an example of the lion's den political strategy.
Exactly.
Can you explain what that is?
Oh, I mean, he goes in. The fact is, these are not his proposals; they're the administration's, and these are ideas that are. They're not as simple. It's not as simple to make these reforms. You go before the people who are hostile to this thing, and then you get a guy like Curtin, who I think they must have hired to do this, who then did the stupid thing of attacking you, and you can come back at him.
Do you remember the last person who did this with great effect?
John Anderson.
John Anderson.
What did the gun nut. John Anderson, and look at what it got for him.
Where did Anderson go? Where did he go?
Where did he go to give the speech?
New Hampshire.